Here's a slightly unfair warning before we even start. By the end of this video, there is a very good chance you will have a song stuck in your head, and it will not be one you chose. Because that is the strange little thing we are talking about today. Almost everyone watching this gets a song looping in their head at least once a week, usually the same 4 seconds on repeat, and almost all of them quietly assume theirs is uniquely annoying. So in the next few minutes, I am going to show you what is actually happening when a song gets stuck, why your brain does it to you completely uninvited, and the genuinely effective ways to make it stop. Let me start by clearing up what almost everyone gets wrong about this. Most people think a stuck song is just random bad luck, or that some songs are simply catchy and there is nothing to be done but suffer until it fades on its own. You treat it like the weather. It shows up, you wait it out, eventually it passes, and in the meantime, you are at its mercy. There is even a quiet little fear underneath it that this time it might just never leave. And no, you are not slowly losing your mind, in case some dramatic corner of your brain has suggested that. This is one of the most common and most normal things a human brain does. But the belief that it is random and unfixable is wrong on both counts, and it is the exact reason these things torture you longer than they ever need to. A stuck song is not random. It follows clear patterns, it strikes at very specific moments, and it is caused by a particular quirk in how your brain handles memory. Once you understand that quirk, you stop being helpless. There are real tested ways to evict one, and silently suffering is not your only option. So here is the plan, because I do not want you guessing where we are going. I am going to walk you through 3 things, in order. First, what a stuck song actually is, the real mechanism behind it. Second, why certain songs hijack your brain, and the exact moments they tend to strike. And third, the methods that genuinely get rid of one, backed by real research, not just folk wisdom. Let's start with what is really going on up there. The first thing to understand is that a stuck song is your memory system caught in a loop. Scientists have a wonderfully nerdy name for this. They call it involuntary musical imagery, which is just a fancy way of saying a song playing in your mind that you never pressed play on. And here's the key part. When it happens, the parts of your brain that process actual sound, your auditory cortex, light up almost as if the music were really playing in the room. Your brain is essentially replaying the track through its own internal speakers, except you never asked it to and you cannot find the off switch. It is not a sound coming in from the world. It is your own memory looping back on itself. And a lot of it runs on what is basically your inner singing voice, the same silent narrator you are using to read these words in your head right now without moving your lips. Your brain quietly hums the track to itself using that inner voice on a loop just below the level of real sound. Hold on to that little detail because it turns out to be the secret weakness we are going to exploit later to shut the whole thing off. But here's the detail that explains almost everything. Notice that you almost never get an entire song stuck. You get a fragment, the chorus, a single line, one hook, the same little piece over and over and over. There is a real reason for that. Your brain has a deep dislike of things left unfinished, a kind of itch to complete a pattern it has already started. When a song fragment sits incomplete in your memory, your brain keeps looping it, almost as if it is trying to get to the end and finally resolve it, but it never quite reaches the resolution, so it just runs the loop again. Researchers actually call it a cognitive itch. The unfinished song is the itch, and the loop is your brain scratching at it without ever quite reaching the spot. Here's the example you have absolutely lived. You catch half a chorus on the radio in the car, or someone says a phrase that happens to match a lyric, and you only got a piece of it. And that piece, the incomplete one, is exactly what gets stuck. Meanwhile, the songs you know all the way through, the ones you have heard 1,000 times start to finish, rarely loop at all. It is the half-remembered fragment your brain cannot resolve that hooks in deepest. The most stubborn one I ever got was a jingle from a commercial I had not seen in years. Some smell in a grocery store quietly dragged it up out of a dusty corner of my memory, and it ran on loop for nearly 2 full days. 2 days of free advertising in my own skull for a product I am never going to buy. And you are in enormous company with this, by the way. The surveys on it consistently find that the overwhelming majority of people get these regularly, and that most of them last anywhere from a few minutes to about a day before they fade. So, if yours feels uniquely stubborn, it almost certainly is not. You are just one of billions of people walking around with a private song playing that nobody else can hear. There is something kind of beautiful about that, even at hour 6 of the same chorus. And here is the warning. The very first mistake almost everyone makes. The moment the loop starts, your instinct is to fight it, to force it out, to think, stop, stop, please stop, do not do that. There's a classic finding in psychology that trying hard not to think about something makes your brain quietly monitor for it, just to check whether it is gone, and that monitoring keeps the thing active and often makes it louder. You cannot win a wrestling match against your own attention. So if forcing it out backfires, the obvious next question is why a song grabbed you in the first place and when. The second thing to understand is that stuck songs are surprisingly picky about both their songs and their timing. Let's start with the songs, because not everything gets stuck. The tracks that worm in tend to share a few traits. They are usually simple and repetitive enough to be easy to replay in your head, but they carry some small surprise in the melody, an unexpected jump, or an odd little turn that makes them just distinctive enough to snag and hold your attention. Easy to loop, but with a hook your brain finds genuinely interesting. Researchers who studied this found that the stickiest songs tend to have a fairly common, predictable overall shape, with one or two unusual intervals that stand out. Easy to follow, with a little twist. That combination is basically the recipe, and it is exactly why advertising jingles are built the way they are. A good jingle is engineered to be a friendly little earworm, simple and bouncy with one memorable twist, so it quietly sets up camp in your head, and you remember the brand later when you are standing in the store. That is not an accident or bad luck. Someone was paid very well to plant that loop in you, and they use the same principles we are talking about right now. Tempo plays a role too. The songs that loop tend to sit at a fairly upbeat, walking or faster pace, which is part of why slow ballads rarely get stuck, but bouncy hooks do. Your brain seems to prefer looping something with a bit of momentum to it. Now the timing, which is the part that will make you nod along. Think honestly about when songs get stuck for you. It is almost always when your mind is somewhere in the middle, not fully busy and not fully at rest. In the shower, on your commute, washing dishes, folding laundry, walking a route you have walked 100 times. These are low attention states where your mind is free to wander. And a wandering mind is exactly the playground where a loop can take hold and run completely unsupervised. The other big trigger is plain memory association. You walk past a certain place, catch a certain smell, hear a single word, and it quietly pulls up a song attached to that moment somewhere in your past, and off it goes again. And recently hearing a song obviously matters too. The track you heard 3 times yesterday is loaded and ready to fire. That association triggers the sneakiest one because it can reach back years. I once had a song surface out of nowhere on a train, and it took me a full 10 minutes to work out that the man across from me was wearing the same cologne my uncle used to wear when I was a kid. And that song must have been playing in his car on some forgotten afternoon 2 decades ago. My brain had quietly held onto that link the entire time, just waiting for a stray scent to pull the trigger. You are carrying thousands of those hidden little connections around with you, any one of which, a totally random Tuesday, can set off without warning. And here's the warning for this part, because it explains why some loops feel impossible to shake. The more stressed or tired you are, the stickier these get. A tired, stressed brain is simply worse at steering its own attention. So the loop runs longer and feels louder and harder to interrupt. You have probably noticed your worst, most relentless earworms tend to show up on your most drained days. That is not a coincidence, which is frustrating, but it also points us straight at the solution. Because if a stuck song is an unfinished loop, feeding on an idle or distracted mind, then the way out is to give your brain the right kind of input on purpose, instead of leaving the playground empty. The third thing, and the part you actually clicked for, is how to genuinely get one out of your head. There are a handful of methods that real studies have tested, and the good news is they all run on the same logic, so they are going to make complete sense to you now. The first one sounds almost too silly to be true: chew gum. Researchers ran an actual study on this and found that chewing gum measurably cut down how often people replayed a stuck song. Remember that inner singing voice from earlier, the one your brain hums the loop with. The leading explanation is that the small, repetitive mouth movement interferes with that exact machinery, the same silent voice you use to sing along in your head. Without making a sound, Jam it up with chewing, and the loop has a much harder time running. It is a genuinely tested trick, and it costs almost nothing to try. The second method goes directly against your instinct in the best possible way. Instead of avoiding the song, finish it. Remember, the loop keeps running because the fragment is unresolved, that cognitive itch your brain cannot quite scratch. So listen to the whole song, all the way through to the actual ending, just one time. Letting your brain reach the real resolution can satisfy that need for completion and close the loop. The same way finally finishing a nagging little task quiets the reminder in your head. The very thing you were desperately trying to avoid is sometimes the exact thing that sets you free. The third method is to gently occupy your mind with something moderately demanding. The keyword is moderately. Not too easy, because an idle mind is where loops thrive in the first place, and not so hard that you get overwhelmed and quit. A good puzzle, a chapter of a book that actually requires you to follow it. A real conversation, a crossword, an anagram, anything that asks your brain to genuinely engage. The trick is matching the difficulty to the moment. If you are exhausted on the couch, a dense book will just bounce off you and the song wins. Something like a quick word game, or actually talking to the person next to you instead of half listening, tends to hit the sweet spot. Enough to occupy that inner voice, not so much that you give up and drift right back into the loop. There is even a gentler fourth option some people swear by, which is to play one specific other song you know all the way through, a kind of cure tune, to overwrite the fragment with something your brain can actually finish. And here is the warning that ties the entire video together. Notice that not a single one of these is just try harder to stop thinking about it. That approach, the white knuckle suppression, is the one thing that reliably fails, because as we said, fighting the loop is what keeps it alive. Every method that actually works does the exact opposite. It gives your brain something better to chew on, literally in the case of the gum, or it lets the song finish, instead of declaring an unwinnable war in your own attention. So let me pull this all together, because once you see it laid out, the whole thing stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling almost manageable. You learn that a stuck song is not random and it is not magic. It is involuntary musical imagery. Your memory system replaying a fragment through your brain's own internal speakers, looping endlessly because it cannot resolve an unfinished pattern, the cognitive itch it keeps scratching. You learn that the songs that get stuck are the simple but slightly surprising ones, and that they strike when your mind is idle or wandering, especially on the days you are tired or stressed. And you learn the ways out, which all share one quiet logic. Chew gum to jam the inner replay. Finish the song to close the loop. Give your mind a moderately engaging task so the loop loses the room it needs to run. And whatever you do, stop trying to force it out, because the fight itself is what feeds it. And here's the part I really want you to keep, because it reframes the whole annoying experience. A stuck song is not a glitch, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is the side effect of having a powerful, pattern-loving memory, a brain so good at learning and storing music that it sometimes presses play entirely on its own. The same system that lets a single old song instantly drop you back into one specific summer from years ago, or bring tears to your eyes at a wedding, or make a whole crowd move together at a concert, is the same system that occasionally gets one chorus caught spinning in a loop. It is a tiny tax on a genuinely incredible gift. You do not have a broken brain. You have a deeply musical one, and that is a wonderful thing to have. It is worth sitting with that for a second, honestly. We spend so much energy being annoyed at our own brains, for looping a song, for replaying an old embarrassing moment, for inventing worries late at night. But almost every one of those little irritations is the flip side of something the very same brain does brilliantly. The looping song is just the cost of a mind that can hold the entire soundtrack of your life. That is not a bad trade at all when you finally look at the whole receipt. So the next time one shows up uninvited, do not panic and do not fight it. Reach for a piece of gum, or finish the song, or pick up a puzzle, and let it go the easy way instead of the hard one. And if none of that works and the thing just refuses to leave, you can always take comfort in the fact that it will fade on its own soon enough, and that somewhere out there a few million other people are quietly suffering through the exact same chorus tonight. You are never really alone in there. And tell me down in the comments because I am genuinely curious and a little bit sorry in advance. What song is stuck in your head right now, this exact second? Name it below. Yes, you are absolutely about to pass it along to everyone else reading the comments, and honestly, that might be the most human thing I can think of. And if you want to understand more of the quiet things your brain does without ever asking your permission, go watch the one on why your best ideas show up in the shower. Because it is the same wandering idle mind we just talked about, simply doing something a lot more useful with its free time. I'll see you over there.